The dirty washcloth slapped against the cold marble floor of the estate, sending gray water across my feet as I watched my daughter Samantha scrubbing her mother-in-law's diapers with raw, bleeding knuckles. I threw my suitcase down and marched straight toward the man who dared call himself her husband. The look of terror that flashed across his face told me everything I needed to know about what would happen next. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this Atlanta nightmare, because trust me, the story of how a mother from Wisconsin ended up plotting revenge in a mansion down south is worth every second of your time. They say that no news is good news. That is the biggest lie ever told to a mother. No news is just silence, and silence is where the worry grows. It starts in the pit of your stomach and works its way up until it's all you can think about. My name is Rose Palmer. I'm 65 years old, and I've lived in a small town in Wisconsin my entire life. I know what a happy home sounds like. It sounds like laughter. It sounds like doors opening and closing. It sounds like life. But for the last 3 years, the only sound I've had from my daughter, Samantha, has been silence. Well, not total silence, but the kind of silence that hides things. Samantha lives in Atlanta now. She moved there 3 years ago when she married Stephen. Stephen is handsome. I'll give him that. He comes from a family with money, old money, the kind that has big gates and long driveways. When Samantha first told me about him, her eyes sparkled. She told me about the parties, the family estate, the business trips. She was so full of ambition and love. I was happy for her. Every mother wants her daughter to have a comfortable life, better than what she had. But then the visits stopped. The phone calls got shorter. I would call her on a Sunday afternoon just to catch up. She would answer, but she always sounded breathless. You know that sound, like she had just run up a flight of stairs, or like she was looking over her shoulder. "Hi, Mom," she'd say, her voice tight. "I can't talk long. We're busy." "Busy with what, honey?" I'd ask. "It's Sunday. Just things. Hosting. Stephen's family needs me. I have to go." Click. That was it. Stephen's family needs me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that high society in Atlanta was just different from life here in Wisconsin. Maybe they were always rushing off to galas or charity events. I tried to picture my Samantha in a beautiful gown, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with wealthy friends. That's the picture she painted in the few letters she wrote. But a mother's intuition is a powerful thing. It doesn't rely on photos or letters. It relies on a feeling in your gut. And my gut told me something was wrong. Then the text came. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a card. It was a text message on a Tuesday morning. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was making coffee. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. It was from Stephen. "Mother is asking to see you. Come for a week." I stared at the screen. I read it again. "Mother is asking to see you. Not Samantha misses you. Not we would love to have you. Not please come visit." It was cold. It was transactional. And it was strange. Why was Stephen's mother asking to see me? I had only met the woman once, briefly, at the wedding. Lucille. She was a stern woman, sitting in her wheelchair like a queen on a throne, barely looking at anyone. Why would she want to see me now, after 3 years of ignoring my existence? I tried to call Samantha immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Stephen. No answer. I sat down at my kitchen table, my coffee going cold. A normal person might be excited. A sudden invitation to a mansion in Atlanta, a chance to see my daughter. It should have been a happy moment, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Mother is asking to see you." It felt like a summons. It felt like a command. But more than that, it felt like an opening, a crack in the door that had been shut in my face for 3 years. I didn't reply to the text right away. I went to the hallway closet and pulled down my old suitcase. I unzipped it on the bed. As I started folding my clothes, my hands were shaking. I wasn't shaking with excitement. I was shaking with nerves. I packed my sensible shoes, my Sunday dress, and my thick cardigan because airplanes are always cold. I walked over to the dresser and picked up a framed photo of Samantha. It was taken right before she left for Atlanta. She was smiling, her cheeks flushed pink, looking right at the camera. She looked unstoppable. That was the girl I raised. Strong, smart, full of life. Where was that girl now? Why hadn't she been the one to text me? Why did she sound so scared on the phone? I looked at her face in the photo and made a promise. "I'm coming, Sam," I whispered. "I'm coming to see what's really going on." I texted Stephen back 2 words. "I'll be there." The flight from Wisconsin to Atlanta is long enough to think too much. I sat by the window, watching the clouds. The woman next to me was reading a romance novel, completely relaxed. I gripped the armrest until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't just a mother going for a visit. I was going on a mission. I needed to see Samantha's eyes. You can lie over the phone. You can lie in a text message. You can even lie in a letter. But you cannot lie when your mother is looking you dead in the face. I needed to know why my daughter had become a ghost in her own life. I needed to know why Stephen was the one summoning me. And I needed to know why, after 3 years of silence, I was suddenly allowed inside the gates. As the plane began its descent into Atlanta, the pilot announced the weather was warm and sunny. People around me started gathering their bags, chatting about their vacations. I didn't feel the warmth. I felt a chill. I was about to walk into my son-in-law's house, and I had a feeling that the luxury I had imagined was nothing but a coat of paint over something rotting. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and stepped off the plane. I was ready to play the part of the happy, oblivious grandmother. But underneath, I was watching. I was listening, and I wasn't going to leave until I knew the truth. My name is Rose Palmer, and I didn't know it yet, but I was walking straight into a nightmare. The taxi driver whistled low as we pulled up to the gates. "You didn't say you were visiting the Royals, ma'am," he joked, looking at the massive iron gates towering over us. I didn't laugh. I just stared at the house that loomed at the end of the long, paved driveway. It was a mansion, no doubt about it. It was made of gray stone, with tall windows that looked like unblinking eyes. The lawn was perfect, too perfect. The grass was cut so short it looked like a carpet, and the hedges were trimmed into sharp, severe squares. There wasn't a tricycle in the driveway, no garden hose left out, no flowers that looked like they had been planted with love. It was immaculate, impressive, and completely soulless. It looked less like a home and more like a museum where you aren't allowed to touch anything. I paid the driver and stepped out. The air in Atlanta was humid, heavy against my skin, but as I walked up the steps to the front door, I felt a distinct chill. I reached for the heavy brass knocker, but before my hand could touch it, the door swung open. It was Stephen. "Rose," he said. "No, Mom. No, Mother, just Rose." He was wearing a crisp polo shirt and golf slacks, looking every bit the wealthy master of the house. He didn't smile. He didn't step forward to hug me. He just stood in the doorway, blocking the view inside, and glanced at his watch. A gold watch that probably cost more than my car. "You made good time," he said, his tone flat. He checked the time again, as if I were a delivery he had to sign for. "The flight was on time?" "It was," I said, gripping the handle of my suitcase. "It's good to see you, Stephen." I waited for him to take my bag. That's what a gentleman does. That's what a son-in-law does. But he just stood there for a beat too long, looking at me, before finally sighing a short, sharp exhale through his nose and reaching out to grab the handle. "Come in," he said, turning his back on me. "Don't scratch the floors with the wheels." I stepped inside. The foyer was enormous. You could fit my entire house inside this one room. The floors were marble, polished to a mirror shine, so clear I could see my own tired reflection looking back at me. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, catching the light. But it was quiet, dead quiet. "Where is she?" I asked. My voice echoed off the cold walls. "Where is Samantha?" Stephen was already walking away, dragging my suitcase toward a staircase that curved upward. "She's around, probably in the kitchen or the west wing." He didn't even look back. "She knows you're here." He left my bag at the bottom of the stairs and walked off toward a set of double doors on the right. "I have a conference call. Make yourself comfortable. Just try not to disturb Mother. She's resting." And just like that, he was gone. I was standing alone in a house that cost millions of dollars, feeling like an intruder. "Samantha?" I called out, tentative at first. Nothing. I walked further into the house, my sensible shoes clicking loudly on the marble. I passed a formal dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 people. It was set with a lace runner, but no dust, not a speck. It looked like no one had eaten there in years. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A door near the back of the hallway swung open. "Mom." The voice was small, thin. I turned around, a smile already breaking across my face, ready to wrap my arms around my beautiful, successful daughter. My smile froze. The woman standing there was Samantha, but it wasn't the Samantha I knew. My daughter had always been curvy, healthy, with cheeks that flushed pink when she laughed. She used to wear bright colors, yellows, teals, floral prints. She loved jewelry and always had her hair done up in soft waves. The woman in front of me was a ghost. She was wearing a shapeless, gray dress that hung off her frame like a sack. It looked like a uniform, something you'd buy in a bulk pack. Her hair, usually so shiny, was pulled back into a severe, tight bun at the base of her neck, looking dull and unwashed. And she was thin, too thin. Her collarbones poked out from the neckline of the dress, sharp and fragile. "Sam!" I whispered. She rushed forward then, closing the distance between us. But she didn't run with the bounds she used to have. She moved quickly, quietly, keeping her head down. She hugged me, and I felt my heart break. Holding her was like holding a bundle of sticks. I could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of that awful dress. She smelled of bleach and lemon cleaner, not the expensive perfume she used to love. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered into my shoulder. Her voice was trembling. I pulled back to look at her face. She had no makeup on. There were dark, purple circles under her eyes that looked like bruises from lack of sleep. Her skin was pale, almost grayish. "Honey, look at you," I said, my motherly instinct taking over. I reached for her hands to squeeze them, to offer some comfort. That was when I felt it. Her hands. Samantha had always had soft hands. She was an artist, a painter. She took care of her hands. But the hands I was holding now were rough. They were like sandpaper. I looked down. Her knuckles were red and swollen. The skin was cracked and peeling, the way hands get when they've been in soapy water for hours and hours, day after day. Her fingernails were cut down to the quick, no polish, just raw, bitten edges. These were not the hands of a socialite living a life of luxury. These were the hands of a woman who scrubbed floors. These were working hands. "Samantha," I said, rubbing my thumb over a particularly rough patch of dry skin on her palm. "What happened to your hands? Why are they so raw?" She yanked her hands away as if I had burned her. She tucked them behind her back, her eyes darting toward the stairs where Stephen had left my bag. "It's nothing," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just dry skin. The air in the house is dry. The AC runs a lot." "Dry skin?" I asked, lowering my voice. "Sam, you look exhausted. You've lost so much weight. Are you sick?" She shook her head vigorously, a forced, tight smile stretching across her face. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes remained terrified. "No, Mom, I'm fine. I'm great. I've just been keeping active. Stephen likes us to eat healthy. It's a lifestyle change. A lifestyle change. Starvation isn't a lifestyle." "And the dress?" I asked, gesturing to the gray sack she was wearing. "Since when do you wear this? You used to love color." "It's just practical," she stammered. "For around the house. It's comfortable." She was lying. I knew it. She knew it. But before I could press her, before I could ask why her husband greeted me like a nuisance, and why she looked like a servant in her own home, a sound cut through the air. Ding, ding, ding. It was a sharp, metallic sound. A bell. An old-fashioned handbell, ringing from somewhere upstairs. The reaction was immediate. Samantha jumped. Actually jumped like she had been slapped. The color drained from her face, leaving her even paler than before. Her posture shifted instantly from my daughter to a soldier on alert. "I have to go," she gasped. She was already backing away from me. "What?" "Sam, I just got here," I said, reaching for her. "Who is ringing a bell?" "It's Lucille," she said, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "She's awake. She needs me. I can't keep her waiting." "Lucille?" I asked, confused. "Stephen's mother? Can't Stephen go? Or a nurse?" "No." Samantha looked at the stairs with genuine fear in her eyes. "No, she wants me. Only me. Please, Mom, just sit down. I'll be back. I just have to see what she wants." Ding, ding, ding. The bell rang again, louder this time, impatient, demanding. "I'm coming." Samantha yelled up the stairs, her voice cracking. She turned and ran. She didn't walk. She ran up those marble stairs, her gray dress swishing around her thin legs. I stood there, my hand still reaching out to empty air. I watched my daughter disappear onto the landing. I heard a door open upstairs, and then a shrill, muffled voice shouting something I couldn't make out. Then the door closed. Silence returned to the hallway. I looked around the grand, empty foyer. I looked at my lonely suitcase sitting by the bottom step. I looked at the reflection of myself in the polished floor. I had been in the house for less than 10 minutes. My son-in-law had dismissed me. My daughter looked like a malnourished prisoner, and she was running at the sound of a bell to serve a woman who had ignored us for 3 years. I walked over to a velvet armchair near the entrance and sat down, not because I was comfortable, but because my legs felt weak. I looked at my own hands resting on my lap. They were shaking again. Samantha wasn't hosting parties. She wasn't drinking champagne. She was wearing a uniform and hiding her hands. The suspicion that had started as a small knot in my stomach on the plane was now a heavy stone in my chest. I wasn't just a visitor. I was a witness. And whatever was happening in this house, whatever had turned my bright, happy girl into that terrified shadow, I was going to find out. I sat in the silence, listening to the hum of the expensive refrigerator in the distance, and waited for the bell to ring again. I have slept in many beds in my life. I've slept on lumpy mattresses in cheap motels and on the floor of a hospital waiting room when Samantha was getting her tonsils out. But I have never been as uncomfortable as I was in that guest room in Atlanta. The bed was huge, covered in sheets that felt like silk, but the house itself felt wrong. It was too quiet, It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is holding its breath waiting for something bad to happen. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the tree branches outside move across the plaster. I checked the clock on the nightstand. It was 2 a.m. I turned over, trying to force myself to sleep, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother. Everything is fine, I told myself. Stephen is just stressed. Samantha is just tired. You are imagining things. And then I heard it. It was a faint sound. Swish. Scrub. Swish. Scrub. It stopped, then started again. It was rhythmic. It sounded like a brush against stone. I sat up. The house should have been asleep. Stephen had said he had an early meeting. Samantha looked like she was about to collapse hours ago. Who would be up at 2 in the morning scrubbing something? I threw off the heavy duvet and put my feet on the floor. The marble was ice cold against my bare soles. I grabbed my robe, wrapped it tight around me, and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was pitch black, except for a sliver of yellow light coming from under a door at the far end of the corridor. That was the east wing. The wing Stephen had pointed to earlier, saying, "Mother is resting." I didn't call out. I didn't turn on the hallway lights. I walked softly, sticking to the runner rug in the center of the hall, so my footsteps wouldn't echo. As I got closer, the sound got clearer. It wasn't just scrubbing anymore. I heard the distinct sound of water splashing into a bucket. And then I heard a voice. It was a sharp, biting voice. "You're doing it wrong. Again. Are you stupid?" I froze. That wasn't Samantha. That was an older woman. Lucille. I crept closer to the door. It was cracked open just an inch. I pressed my ear toward the gap. "I'm sorry, Lucille," I heard Samantha whisper. Her voice was trembling, wet with tears. "I'm trying to be gentle." "Gentle? You're clumsy," the old woman snapped. "You're rough and useless. Just like your mother, I assume." She raised a simpleton. My blood turned hot. It rushed to my face so fast I felt dizzy. "Just like your mother." I pushed the door open. I didn't slam it. I just pushed it wide enough so I could see. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of a luxury home. It was the smell of sickness, stale air, rubbing alcohol, and the unmistakable, sharp odor of human waste. It was the smell of a nursing home that hadn't been cleaned properly. And then I saw them. Lucille was lying in a massive four-poster bed. She looked frail, but her eyes were sharp and mean. She was watching Samantha with a look of pure disgust. And my daughter? Samantha was on her knees beside the bed. She wasn't wearing gloves. She was holding a soiled adult diaper in one hand and a washcloth in the other. A plastic red bucket of gray. Soapy water sat on the expensive rug beside her. She looked exhausted. Her hair was falling out of that tight bun, sticking to her sweaty forehead. She was wiping the old woman's legs, her movements frantic and terrified. "Lift my leg higher," Lucille barked. "God, do I have to tell you everything?" Stephen should have married a nurse, not a charity case. "I'm sorry," Samantha sobbed, quietly, dropping the soiled diaper into a trash bag that was already full. "I'm hurrying." "Don't cry," Lucille hissed. "I hate it when you cry. It's pathetic. Just finish cleaning me up, so I can sleep. And then do the floor. You spilled water." I watched my daughter, my beautiful, artistic, brilliant daughter, dip her raw, cracked hands back into that dirty water to wring out the rag. She looked broken. She didn't look like a wife. She looked like a slave. I couldn't watch another second. "Samantha," my voice came out louder than I intended. It wasn't a question. It was a command. Samantha's head snapped up. When she saw me standing in the doorway, her face went white. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. She immediately tried to hide the rag behind her back, as if she were a child caught doing something wrong. "Mom," she whispered. "Mom, go back to bed. Please." Lucille turned her head slowly on the pillow. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed that she had been interrupted. "Get out," Lucille croaked. "This is private." I ignored the old woman completely. I walked straight into the room. The smell was overpowering now, but I didn't care. I walked right up to Samantha, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled. "Get up," I said. My voice was shaking. Not with fear, but with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. "Mom, I can't," Samantha pleaded, trying to pull her arm back. "I'm not done. She needs." I said, "Get up." I yanked her harder. Samantha stumbled to her feet, water dripping from her hands onto her dress. "Rose, what do you think you are doing?" Lucille screeched from the bed. "She isn't finished. I need to be changed." I didn't sleep the rest of that night. How could I? I lay in that silk bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning round and round, listening to the silence of the house. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Samantha on her knees. I saw the gray water in that bucket. I heard the way she whimpered when I touched her arm. By the time the sun came up, the rage inside me had settled into something cold and hard. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a plan. I went downstairs at 7 o'clock. Stephen was already at the kitchen table. He was dressed in pristine white pants and a blue polo shirt smelling of expensive cologne. He was eating scrambled eggs and reading something on his tablet. He looked rested. He looked like a man who hadn't a care in the world. Samantha was there, too. She was standing by the stove, waiting for the kettle to boil. She looked even worse in the daylight. Her skin was gray, and her eyes were puffy from crying. When she saw me, she gave a tiny, terrified shake of her head. "Don't say anything," her eyes begged. "Please." I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Good morning, Rose," Stephen said, not looking up from his screen. "Did you sleep well?" I took a sip of the coffee he had poured for himself, not waiting to be offered any. Like a baby, I lied. My voice was steady. "The bed is very comfortable." "Good," he said, finally glancing at me. "I have to head out early. I have a lot of meetings today. Business doesn't stop, even on weekends." I looked at his clothes. "Meetings?" I asked innocently. "You're dressed for the golf course, Stephen." He didn't even blink. "Networking, Rose. That's how deals are made in Atlanta. On the green. You wouldn't understand the corporate world." He stood up, wiping his mouth with a cloth napkin. He walked over to Samantha, kissed her on the cheek, a cold, empty peck, and patted her shoulder. "Mother needs her breakfast by 8 sharp. Don't burn the toast this time." Samantha flinched. "Yes, Stephen. Have a good day." He grabbed his car keys and walked out the door. A moment later, I heard the roar of his sports car engine fading down the driveway. The second he was gone, the air in the kitchen changed. Samantha slumped against the counter, letting out a breath she must have been holding all morning. "Mom," she whispered, "about last night." "We aren't talking about last night right now," I said, standing up. "I'm feeling a little jet-lagged, Sam. I think I'm going to go back upstairs and lie down for a bit. You take care of your duties." I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I would cry, and I didn't have time for tears. I needed her busy. I needed her distracted with Lucille, so I could do what I needed to do. "Oh," she said, sounding disappointed but relieved. "Okay, I'll bring you some lunch later." I waited until she went upstairs with a tray of food for Lucille. I listened for the sound of that bedroom door closing. Then I moved. I didn't go to my room. I went straight to the heavy oak door at the end of a hallway on the main floor. Stephen's home office. I had seen him go in there yesterday. He had closed the door firmly like it was a vault. But Stephen was arrogant. Men like him always are. They think they are the smartest people in the room. They think their wives are too scared to snoop, and their mother-in-laws are too old to notice anything. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. But I grew up with 3 brothers. I knew where men hid things. I checked the top of the door frame. Nothing. I checked under the hallway rug. Nothing. Then I walked over to the antique vase sitting on a side table right next to the door. I tilted it. There, sitting in the bottom of the empty vase, was a small brass key. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I fished it out. I slid the key into the lock. It clicked. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, locking it again. The office smelled like leather and cigar smoke. It was a beautiful room, lined with bookshelves and filled with expensive art. A massive mahogany desk sat in the center, looking like it belonged to a president. I didn't admire the furniture. I went straight to the desk. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a letter? Maybe a diary? But what I found was so much worse. The desk was cluttered with papers. Stephen wasn't tidy. He was careless. He had left a stack of mail right on top of his blotter. I started flipping through it. Bills, invitations, golf magazines. Then I saw it. A bank statement from Peachtree Private Wealth. I opened it. My hands were shaking so bad the paper rattled. I looked at the balance. I had to put my glasses on to make sure I was seeing it right. $2,450,000. $2 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. Last night, my daughter had told me they fired the nurse to save money. She told me they were in a tight patch. She told me she couldn't afford gas money. There was over $2 million in this account alone. I kept digging. I opened the next envelope. It was a credit card statement, not a joint card, a card in Stephen's name only. I scanned the charges. Green Creek Country Club. Membership dues, $15,000. Atlanta Motors. Lease payment, Porsche 911, $2,200. Diamond District Jewelers, $4,500. Ritz-Carlton Hotel, $800. The dates were recent. Last week. Yesterday. While Samantha was on her knees scrubbing feces off the floor because they couldn't afford help, Stephen was buying jewelry. While she was wearing a dress that looked like a potato sack, he was paying $2,000 a month for a sports car. He wasn't broke. He was evil. He was hoarding the money, spending it on himself, and telling Samantha they were destitute, so she would feel guilty. He was using financial fear to turn her into free labor. But why? Why would Samantha believe him? Why didn't she just leave? I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. It was stuffed with file folders. I pulled out a thick red one labeled legal. I opened it, and a document slid out. It wasn't a prenup. It was something dated 2 years ago. Small business loan agreement. I read the text. It was a loan for $500,000 to a company called SB Ventures. I looked at the signature line. There was Stephen's signature, and right next to it was Samantha's, but it looked shaky, wobbly. I flipped to the next page. It was a document drawn up by Stephen's lawyer, a post-nuptial liability agreement. I'm not a lawyer, but the English was plain enough. It stated that the loan for SB Ventures was taken out in Samantha's name as the primary guarantor, with the family home as collateral. It said that in the event of a divorce or separation, the full debt of the business, plus interest, would be the sole responsibility of the guarantor. Samantha, I dropped the folder on the desk. It all made sense now. The tight patch, the firing of the staff. Stephen had taken out a massive loan in Samantha's name 2 years ago. He had likely terrified her into signing it, telling her it was to save the family. He had taken that $500,000 and put it into his own private accounts, the ones I saw on the desk. And now, he was holding it over her head. If she left him, she wouldn't just be leaving with nothing. She would be leaving with a $500,000 debt she couldn't pay. He would keep the house, keep the money, and she would be ruined. She would be bankrupt. He had built a cage, not with bars, but with paper and ink. He had convinced her that she was the one dragging them down, that she owed him. He had made her believe that working as a servant was her penance, her way of paying off a debt that he had manufactured. I looked at the dates again. The loan coincided exactly with when the nurse was fired. He had planned this. He had structured her slavery. I felt a wave of nausea, so strong I had to grab the edge of the desk to steady myself. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a crime. This was financial entrapment. My daughter wasn't weak. She was a hostage. I heard a car door slam outside. I froze. I scrambled to the window and peeked through the blinds. A sleek black car had just pulled up. It wasn't Stephen. It was a delivery driver. I let out a breath, but my heart didn't slow down. I looked at the papers scattered on the desk. I needed proof. If I just told Samantha, she might not believe me. Or worse, she would be too scared to do anything about it. I needed to show her. I reached into my purse, which I had brought with me, and pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I forced them to be steady. Click. Picture of the bank statement showing the millions. Click. Picture of the Porsche lease. Click. Picture of the country club fees. Click. Picture of the loan document with her wobbly signature. I took photos of everything. Every lie. Every dollar. Every threat. I put the papers back exactly how I found them. I slid the red folder into the bottom drawer. I stacked the mail back on the blotter, making sure the edges aligned just like they had before. I slipped out of the room, locked the door, and put the key back in the vase. I walked back to the kitchen, my phone burning a hole in my pocket. I poured myself a glass of water, but I couldn't drink it. I wasn't just a mother visiting anymore. I was a woman with a weapon. Stephen thought he held all the cards. He thought his wife was trapped and her mother was a fool. But he didn't know what I had in my pocket. He was playing golf. He was laughing with his rich friends, spending the money he stole from my daughter's future. Let him laugh, because when he got home, he wasn't going to find the polite, jet-lagged old lady he left this morning. He was going to find me, and I knew his secret. Now, I just had to figure out how to use it without getting my daughter destroyed in the process. Dinner in the Palmer house was a performance, and I was the unwilling audience. The dining room was dim, lit only by the crystal chandelier and candles that flickered on the long mahogany table. Stephen sat at the head, of course. Lucille, who had been wheeled down for the occasion, sat to his right. She looked much livelier now than she had at 2 a.m. Her hair was combed, and she was wearing a silk blouse, looking every bit the matriarch. I sat across from her. My plate was full of roast beef and potatoes, but my stomach was in knots. I couldn't eat. I was too busy watching my daughter. Samantha wasn't sitting. She was moving back and forth from the kitchen, carrying a heavy silver gravy boat, then a basket of rolls, then a pitcher of ice water. She was still wearing that awful gray dress. She looked like a shadow moving in the periphery of her husband's life. "More wine, Mother?" Stephen asked, lifting a bottle of expensive red. "Just a splash," Lucille said, holding out her glass. "The roast is a bit dry, don't you think, Stephen?" Stephen sliced into his meat, ignoring the comment. "Samantha," he called out without looking up. "My mother needs more gravy. It's dry." Samantha hurried over from the sideboard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her hands were shaking as she lifted the heavy silver boat. She poured the gravy over Lucille's beef, a drop spilling onto the tablecloth. Lucille sighed, loudly, a sound of pure exasperation. "Watch what you are doing. That is Belgian linen." "I'll get a cloth," Samantha stammered, turning to run back to the kitchen. "Sit down, Samantha," I said. My voice cut through the room like a knife. Everyone froze. Samantha stopped mid-step. Stephen paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. Lucille narrowed her eyes at me. "Excuse me, Rose?" Stephen said, his tone polite but icy. I said, "Sit down." I repeated, looking at my daughter. "You cooked the meal. You set the table. You should be eating it, not waiting on us like a hired hand." Stephen chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "She will eat when we are settled. Rose. She prefers to make sure Mother is comfortable first. It's her way of showing love." "Is it?" I asked. I turned my gaze to him. "Or is it her way of paying off a debt she thinks she owes you?" The air left the room. Stephen slowly put his fork down. The clink of the silver against the china was deafening. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, picking up his wine glass. "We are going through a difficult financial transition. Samantha understands that. We all have to make sacrifices." "Sacrifices," I repeated. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it. I just held it in my hand, feeling the weight of the pictures I had taken. "Is that what you call a $15,000 membership fee to Green Creek Country Club? A sacrifice?" Stephen choked on his wine. He coughed, setting the glass down hard. "What did you say?" "And the Porsche," I continued, my voice steady and loud. $2,000 a month for a lease. Is that a sacrifice, Stephen? Or is that just a toy you bought while your wife scrubs your mother's waste off the floor?" Samantha dropped the serving spoon she was holding. It clattered onto the floor. "Mom, stop," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "Please don't." "No, I won't stop," I said, standing up. My legs were trembling, but I forced myself to stand tall. "You told her you were broke. You told her you fired the nurse because you couldn't afford help. You lied." I looked him dead in the eye. "You fired the nurse to buy a boat, Stephen. I saw the receipt. The Sea Sprite. $30,000 down payment. Dated 2 weeks after the nurse was let go." The silence that followed was absolute. Lucille looked from me to Stephen, confused. Samantha looked like she was going to faint. Stephen didn't look confused. He looked dangerous. The polite, bored mask he had worn since I arrived melted away. His face twisted into something ugly. He stood up slowly, towering over the table. "You went into my office," he said. "It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I went looking for the truth. I shot back. And I found it. I found the bank statements. $2 million in your private account. And I found that loan, the one you made Samantha sign. The one that puts all the debt on her if she ever tries to leave you." "Shut up," Samantha cried out, covering her ears. "Mom, please stop. She needs to hear this, Sam." I yelled, pointing at him. "He isn't poor. He is stealing your life. He has millions sitting in the bank while he watches you work yourself to the bone." Stephen slammed his hand on the table. The plates rattled. "Enough," he roared. He walked around the table toward me. He didn't touch me, but he got close enough that I could smell the wine on his breath. "You have no right," he hissed. "You have no right to come into my house, eat my food, and go through my private papers. This is my money. I earned it. I built this estate. And what about her?" I pointed at Samantha, who was sobbing by the sideboard. "She is your wife. She is my helpmate." Stephen shouted, "Do you read your Bible, Rose? A wife is to submit to her husband. She is to serve his family. That is her duty before God. She lives in a mansion. She has a roof over her head that most people only dream of. And what does she do? Does she work? Does she bring in a paycheck? No. So she contributes with her hands. That is fair. That is just. It's slavery. I spat at him. You trapped her with a fraudulent loan. I protected my assets, he countered, his face red. She is lucky to be here. She is lucky I didn't divorce her years ago for being as barren and useless as she is. She earns her keep here. If she doesn't like it, she knows where the door is. But she knows what happens if she walks out that door. He turned to Samantha. Tell her, Sam, tell your mother. Do you want to leave? Do you want to take on that debt and live in a trailer park? Or do you want to do your job and take care of my mother? Samantha was shaking so hard she had to lean against the wall. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Stephen, her tormentor. I want to stay, she whispered. Samantha, I gasped. See, Stephen sneered, turning back to me with a triumphant, cruel smile. She knows her place. She understands duty, something you obviously failed to teach her. He straightened his shirt, regaining his composure. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. You are no longer welcome in this house, Rose. You can't kick me out, I said. I'm her mother. I can do whatever I want. This is my property, he said. You will leave tomorrow morning. I will have a car ready for you at 8 a.m. If you are not in it, I will have the police remove you for trespassing. And don't think about taking anything from my office. I have cameras. I'll press charges before you get to the airport. He sat back down at the head of the table. He picked up his fork and stabbed a piece of steak. Samantha, he said calmly, as if he hadn't just screamed in my face. Clean up this mess. Your mother upset Lucille. Yes, Stephen, Samantha whispered. She fell to her knees to pick up the serving spoon. I stood there, stunned. My heart was breaking, but my blood was boiling. I watched my daughter on the floor, broken and defeated. I watched the monster eating his steak. He thought he had won. He thought that by kicking me out, he was ending the problem. He was wrong. I looked at Samantha one last time. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I had until 8 a.m. The clock was ticking. I had lost the battle at the dinner table, but I wasn't leaving without winning the war. I had one night left, one night to turn my daughter from a servant back into a fighter, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I went back to my room, but I didn't cry. Tears are for when you're sad. I wasn't sad. I was at war. I pulled my suitcase out from the closet and threw it on the bed. I started packing, but my hands were moving automatically. Fold the sweater, pack the shoes, zip the toiletries bag. My mind wasn't on the clothes. It was on the clock. It was 9 p.m. I had 11 hours before Stephen's car arrived to take me away. 11 hours before I was forced to leave my daughter in this prison. I zipped the suitcase shut and stood it by the door. Then I turned off the light in my room and opened the door. The hallway was quiet. Stephen had retreated to his office or the master bedroom. I didn't care which. I walked softly down the hall to the small guest room where Samantha was sleeping. I didn't knock. I turned the handle slowly and slipped inside. The room was dark, but the moonlight coming through the window showed me everything I needed to see. Samantha wasn't sleeping. She was sitting on the edge of the twin bed, staring at her hands. She was still wearing that gray dress. Sam, I whispered. She didn't look up. You should go to sleep, Mom. You have an early flight. I walked over and sat next to her on the bed. The mattress was hard. I'm not leaving without you, Samantha. Pack a bag. We are leaving tonight. We'll call a taxi. We'll go to a hotel in the city, and tomorrow we'll fly home to Wisconsin. Samantha finally looked at me. Her face was a roadmap of misery. Her eyes were red, her lips dry. She shook her head slowly. I can't, she said. Her voice was flat, defeated. Yes, you can, I insisted, reaching for her hand. You heard what I said at dinner. The debt is a trick. The money is there. We can fight him. Fight him with what? Samantha snapped, pulling her hand away. With what money? With what lawyer? Mom, you don't get it. He knows judges. He knows the police. If I leave, he creates a violation of contract. He calls the bank. That debt becomes due immediately. $500,000. Do you have $500,000 lying around? We will figure it out, I said, though my voice wavered slightly. No, we won't. She stood up and paced the small room, hugging her arms around herself. He'll destroy me. He'll destroy you. He told me, Mom. He told me that if I ever tried to run, he would make sure I ended up homeless. He said I'm 40 years old with no resume, no skills, and a mountain of debt. He said I'd be scrubbing toilets at a truck stop within a month. She stopped and looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I have no car keys. I have no credit card. I have $12 in my purse. I am trapped. I looked at her, my little girl, who used to be so brave, and I realized something terrifying. I could physically drag her out of this house. I could force her into a taxi, but it wouldn't matter. Stephen had broken her mind. He had convinced her that she was helpless. If I took her out now, she would just live in fear, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She didn't just need to escape the house. She needed to escape the fear. She needed to believe she could win. I took a deep breath. I stopped being the frantic mother and started being the strategist. Sit down, I said firmly. Samantha looked at me, surprised by the change in my tone. She sat. You are right, I said. If you leave tonight, running away like a thief in the night, he wins. He'll hunt you down with his lawyers. Exactly, she sniffled. So, I said, leaning in close, you aren't going to run. You are going to stay. Samantha looked confused. What? You are going to stay, I repeated. For now. But you aren't going to be his servant anymore. You are going to be a spy. I reached into the hidden pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out a small, flat object. It was a credit card. Take this, I said, pressing it into her hand. Samantha looked at it. Mom, this is your emergency card. It has a $20,000 limit, I said, and Stephen doesn't know it exists. He can't track it. He can't cancel it. What am I supposed to do with this? She asked, her hands trembling. You are going to buy a phone, I said. Tomorrow, when he sends you to the grocery store, you go to Walmart. You buy a cheap prepaid phone. You hide it. You do not let him see it. That is your lifeline to me. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my own phone. I opened the voice memo app and hit play. Stephen's voice filled the quiet room, tinny but clear. I protected my assets. She is lucky to be here. She earns her keep here. If she doesn't like it, she knows where the door is. Samantha's eyes went wide. You recorded him? Every word, I said grimly. I have him on tape admitting that he treats you like an employee, that he threatens you with debt, and that he has assets he's hiding. This isn't just a marital spat, Sam. This is evidence of financial abuse and coercion. No judge in Atlanta will enforce that prenup if they hear this tape. Samantha looked at my phone, then at the credit card in her hand. For the first time in 3 years, I saw a flicker of something other than fear in her eyes. I saw a spark. I'm sending this recording to my cloud storage right now. I told her, it's safe, but we need more. We need those bank statements I saw. We need copies of the emails he sends his accountant. I grabbed her shoulders and looked her dead in the eye. I have to leave tomorrow, Sam. He's going to kick me out. But I am leaving you with a weapon. You have money he can't touch. You have a mother on the outside who knows the truth. You are not alone anymore. Samantha ran her thumb over the raised numbers on the credit card. A spy, she whispered. Yes, I said. He thinks you're stupid. He thinks you're weak. Use that. Let him think he's won. Let him think I'm gone and you're back under his thumb. And while he's busy playing golf and buying boats, you document everything. And then, she asked, and then when you have enough, I said, you don't just leave. You burn his kingdom to the ground. You take half, Samantha. You take what you earned. She took a shaky breath. She looked at the door, then back at me. She wiped her tears, not with a frantic swipe, but with a slow, deliberate motion. Okay, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it wasn't broken anymore. Okay, Mom. Hide the card. I ordered. In your shoe. Under the sole. Do it now. She slipped off her worn-out flat shoe, lifted the insole, and slid the credit card underneath. She put the shoe back on. I love you, Mom, she said. I love you too, I said, standing up. Now get some sleep. You have work to do tomorrow. I walked back to my room, feeling lighter than I had in days. Stephen thought he was sending an old lady home to Wisconsin to knit and cry. He had no idea. He wasn't getting rid of a problem. He was activating a sleeper agent. He had given me an ultimatum. Now, I had given my daughter a plan. I lay down in the dark and closed my eyes. The battle wasn't over. In fact, the real fight was just beginning. And for the first time, I knew we were going to win. 8 o'clock in the morning has never felt so final. The sun was shining bright over Atlanta, hitting the manicured lawns and the big iron gates. But inside the house, it felt like a funeral. My suitcase was waiting by the front door. I had packed it myself. I hadn't slept more than an hour, my mind racing with the plan I had set in motion the night before. Now, in the harsh light of day, the reality of leaving my daughter behind was hitting me like a physical blow. Stephen was standing in the foyer, leaning against the banister. He looked fresh, rested, and painfully smug. He was wearing a light gray suit, checking emails on his phone, acting as if kicking his mother-in-law out on the street was just another item on his to-do list. The car is here, Rose, he said without looking up. I hired a private service, much cleaner than a taxi. I told the driver to take you straight to the terminal. How generous of you, I said, my voice dripping with ice. I try, he smirked, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold. I hope you have a safe flight back to wherever it is you live. Wisconsin, right? Quiet place. You should stay there. He wasn't just saying goodbye. He was marking his territory. He was telling me that this house, this city, and my daughter belonged to him, and I was just a temporary nuisance he had successfully removed. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. Where is Samantha? I asked. I'm not leaving without saying goodbye. She's in the kitchen, Stephen said, waving a hand dismissively. Making my smoothie. She knows the schedule. I walked past him, ignoring the way he rolled his eyes. I pushed open the swinging door to the kitchen. Samantha was standing by the counter. She was slicing strawberries, her movements mechanical. She was still wearing that shapeless dress, but something was different. Her shoulders weren't slumped quite as low. Her hair was brushed. And when she saw me, she didn't look terrified. She looked focused. Mom, she said softly. She put the knife down and wiped her hands on a towel. It's time, honey, I said, walking over to her. I wanted to grab her and run. I wanted to throw her in that car and never look back. But I knew that wouldn't save her. It would only delay the inevitable. She had to save herself. She nodded. She reached into her pocket, the one where I knew she had hidden the credit card I gave her inside her shoe the night before, and patted it lightly, a secret signal. I'm ready, she whispered. I'm going to Walmart today. I'll get the phone. Good, I said, keeping my voice low. Don't call me until you are outside the house. And don't text. Voice only. He can't read a voice. I know, she said. We stood there for a moment, just breathing, mother and daughter, conspirators. Then the silence was shattered. Clang, clang, clang. The bell, that hateful brass handbell, ringing from the upstairs bedroom. It was followed immediately by a screeching voice. Samantha, I'm wet. Samantha. Lucille. I saw Samantha's body tense up out of habit. It was a conditioned response, like a dog flinching at a raised hand. The kitchen door swung open, and Stephen marched in. He looked annoyed, not at his mother, but at his wife. Did you hear that? He snapped. Mother is calling you. Why are you just standing there? Go. Now. He pointed to the door like he was commanding a disobedient puppy. In the past, yesterday, even Samantha would have dropped everything. She would have run. She would have apologized, bowed her head, and scrambled up those stairs to change a grown woman's diaper while her husband drank a smoothie. But today was different. Samantha didn't move. She stood perfectly still by the counter, her hand resting on the towel. She didn't look at the door. She looked at me. Then, slowly, she turned her head and looked at Stephen. Stephen paused, his brow furrowing. He wasn't used to stillness. He was used to obedience. Samantha, he said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning tone creeping in. I said, go get her. She's screaming. I hear her, Stephen, Samantha said. Her voice was calm. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was just steady. Well, he barked. Move. Samantha picked up the knife again. She picked up a strawberry. She sliced the top off, the sound of the blade hitting the cutting board loud in the quiet kitchen. Chop. In a minute, Stephen, she said, I'm saying goodbye to my mother. The air left the room. Stephen's mouth actually fell open. He looked stunned. It was such a small thing. In a minute, but in this house, it was an earthquake. For 3 years, Samantha had never made anyone wait. For 3 years, she had been instant. Excuse me? Stephen sputtered, his face turning red. What did you just say to me? Samantha didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She just kept slicing the strawberry. Chop, chop. I said in a minute, she repeated, not looking at him. Lucille can wait 60 seconds. Mom is leaving. Stephen looked at me, then back at her. He didn't know what to do. He had lost the script. If she had yelled, he could have yelled back. If she had cried, he could have bullied her. But this calm refusal, he had no defense for it. He let out a huff of disbelief, running a hand through his perfect hair. Fine, he spat. Make it quick. If Mother gets a rash, it's on your head. He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, the door swinging violently behind him. As soon as he was gone, Samantha dropped the knife. She let out a long, shaky breath and grabbed the counter for support. I did it, she whispered, her eyes wide. You did, I said, moving quickly to hug her. You stood your ground. That was the hardest part, Sam. The first no is always the hardest. She buried her face in my shoulder. She was trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was the feeling of a prisoner realizing the door isn't locked as tight as they thought. I can do this, she said into my coat. I can do this. I know you can, I said, pulling back to look at her face. I cupped her cheeks in my hands. Listen to me closely, Samantha. I leaned in, whispering directly into her ear, so not even the walls could hear us. You play the part. You be the good wife. You clean the floors. You cook the meals. But every time he leaves the house, you work for us. She nodded, her eyes locking onto mine. Use the account I gave you. I continued, my voice fierce. Hire the forensic accountant I told you about. Get the bank records. Get the emails. Get copies of that loan agreement. Do not leave a single piece of paper unturned." "I will," she promised. "And remember," I said, squeezing her shoulders, "we aren't just leaving. We aren't running away with our tails between our legs. When you walk out of this front door, you are going to own half of it. You leave with half. Samantha, that is your money. That is your life he stole. You take it back." "Half," she repeated. The word sounded like a prayer. "Rose, the car is waiting." Stephen yelled from the foyer. I kissed her forehead one last time. "Be smart. Be safe. I'll be by the phone." I let her go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, leaving her standing in that kitchen, knowing she had to go upstairs and face that woman, knowing she had to sleep in the house with that man. But as I picked up my purse and walked to the door, I looked back. Samantha wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking at the knife on the counter. She picked it up and went back to slicing the fruit. Chop, chop, chop. She had a job to do. And so did I. I walked out into the foyer. Stephen was holding the front door open, tapping his foot. Finally, he muttered, "Goodbye, Rose." I stopped in front of him. I didn't shake his hand. I didn't smile. I looked him up and down, from his expensive shoes to his arrogant sneer. "Goodbye, Stephen," I said. "Enjoy your golf game." Enjoy it while you can, I thought. I walked down the steps and got into the black sedan waiting in the driveway. The driver closed the door, sealing me in the cool, quiet interior. As we pulled away, I watched the house through the tinted window. I saw Stephen close the big front door. The lock clicked shut. He thought he was locking me out. He thought he was safe in his fortress. He didn't know that I had left the Trojan horse right in his kitchen, slicing strawberries. I sat back in the seat and watched the mansion disappear behind the trees. I didn't cry. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had looked up the night before. "Hello," a voice answered on the second ring. "Atlanta Family Law, how can I help you?" "My name is Rose Palmer," I said, staring out at the road ahead. "I need to put a lawyer on retainer for my daughter. It's going to be a messy one. We're going to need a forensic audit." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, surprised by my tone. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "Drive," I said. "I have work to do." The flight back to Wisconsin was the longest of my life. I sat in seat 14B, staring at the back of the seat in front of me, listening to the hum of the engines. The woman next to me tried to make small talk about the weather, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was the click of the lock on Stephen's front door. Leaving your child behind is the most unnatural thing a mother can do. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn the plane around, to kick down that door, and to drag Samantha out of that house. My heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in water. I kept wondering, did I do enough? Did I just leave her to the wolves? But then I remembered the strawberry. I remembered the sound of the knife hitting the cutting board. Chop. I remembered the look in her eyes when she said, "In a minute, Stephen." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I hadn't left a victim behind. I had left a spy. I hadn't abandoned her. I had deployed her. I had to trust that the seed I planted, the credit card, the burner phone, the truth about the money, would grow. That was 2 weeks ago. I am back in my kitchen in Wisconsin now. The coffee pot is gurgling, and the morning sun is shining through the window. It's quiet here, peaceful, but my phone is never far from my hand. Yesterday, it rang. It wasn't a text. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it on the first ring. "Mom." The voice was clear. It wasn't breathless. It wasn't whispering. "Samantha," I breathed out. "Are you okay? Is he there?" "He's at the club," she said. "He thinks I'm grocery shopping. I'm in the parking lot of the library, using the Wi-Fi. Did you get the documents?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. I got everything, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. A real smile. I found the second ledger. Mom, you were right. He has accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's been funneling money out of the business for 5 years. The forensic accountant you hired, he says it's a slam dunk. It's fraud. And since I'm the owner of the business on paper, I have legal access to all of it. I let out a laugh that sounded a bit like a sob. So, you own the debt, but you also own the assets. Exactly, Samantha said. Mr. Henderson says that if we file correctly, Stephen won't just lose the house. He might go to prison for embezzlement. And because I have proof of coercion, thanks to your recording, the debt won't stick to me. When are you leaving? I asked. Not yet, she said. I need 1 more week. There is a safety deposit box key I need to find. I know he keeps it in his golf bag. Once I have that, I have everything. Be careful, Sam, I warned. I am, she said. But Mom, something happened this morning. What? The bank statement, the one you saw on his desk. It went missing, she said. He came into the kitchen in a panic. He was tearing the office apart, yelling, accusing the cleaning service he fired 2 years ago. He looked so small, Mom. He was sweating. He asked me if I had seen it. What did you say? I looked him right in the eye. Samantha said. I was washing his dishes. And I said, oh no, Stephen, I wouldn't know what a bank statement looks like. You handle all the important things, remember? I just scrubbed the floors. We both laughed. It was the sound of victory. He believed me, she continued, because he thinks I'm stupid. He thinks he broke me. He has no idea that the woman washing his dishes is the one who is going to take him down. We hung up a few minutes later. I sat there in my kitchen, looking at the photo of Samantha on my fridge. It was the old photo, the one where she looked young and naive. I realized then that I didn't save my daughter that day in Atlanta. If I had dragged her out, she would have been safe, yes, but she would have been scared. She would have spent the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, feeling like a failure who ran away. I did something better. I reminded her who she was. I gave her the tools to fight. I showed her that the monster wasn't a giant. He was just a thief with a loud voice. And now, she isn't running away from the fire. She is walking through it, and she is going to come out the other side holding the keys to her own life. Stephen thinks he is still the king of his castle. He thinks his wife is his servant. But every time he leaves to play golf, the servant becomes the master. And soon, very soon, the lock on that front door is going to change. And this time, Rose Palmer won't be the one waiting outside. Let me ask you, was Rose right to leave Samantha there to fight her own battle, or should she have called the police and forced her to leave immediately? It was a risky choice, but was it the right one? Tell me in the comments. And before you go, I want to connect with you. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Write it in the comments below. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, please consider supporting the channel. Even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive and allows me to bring you more stories like Rose and Samantha's. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe so you never miss an update. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love.